Millionaire fakes vegetative state, just to hear the confession of the doctor who operated on his mother. Richard Morgan had been lying motionless in his hospital bed for 3 weeks, connected to machines monitoring every heartbeat. His daughter Jennifer believed her 65-year-old father had suffered a nervous breakdown after discovering irregularities in his grandmother's medical records. What she didn't know was that Richard was fully conscious, pretending to be in a vegetative state, to uncover the truth about what really happened to his mother during that surgery 5 years ago. Dr. Michael Stevens entered room 302 every morning at 9, always accompanied by Nurse Nancy. He was the same doctor who had operated on Mrs. Elizabeth, Richard's mother, in what should have been a simple procedure, but resulted in complications that left her dependent on constant care. Richard had found discrepancies in the medical records and some strange notes that made no sense. The only way to discover the truth was to make Dr. Michael feel safe enough to speak freely. "How is he today, doctor?" Jennifer asked, holding her father's hand. "No significant changes. His vitals are stable, but there's still no response to stimuli," Dr. Michael replied, adjusting his stethoscope. Richard heard every word, carefully controlling his breathing to avoid showing any signs of awareness. He had practiced for weeks before executing his plan. He knew every sound in the hospital, every staff routine, every visiting hour. His determination was fueled by the image of his mother at home, in a wheelchair, staring out the window without recognizing anyone. Nurse Nancy had over 30 years of experience at Mercy General Hospital. She watched Richard with special attention. Something about his behavior intrigued her. During her night rounds, when the hospital grew quieter, she would approach his bed and whisper softly, "I know you can hear me, Mr. Richard. I've seen cases like this before." Richard kept his eyes closed, but his heart rate increased slightly. Nancy continued, "I don't know what you're looking for, but be careful. The truth doesn't always bring the relief we expect." In the following weeks, Richard began noticing strange patterns in Dr. Michael's behavior. The doctor visited outside scheduled hours, sometimes lingered longer than necessary in the room, and Richard could sense the nervousness in his voice when speaking to Jennifer. There was something the doctor wanted to say but couldn't. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us newcomers. Now, back to the story. During one of these late-night visits, Dr. Michael approached Richard's bed and began speaking as if the patient could hear him. "Richard, I know you can't respond, but I need to get this off my chest. About your mother, her surgery." Richard controlled every muscle in his body to avoid reacting. His hands remained relaxed, his breathing steady, but inside, his heart raced. "We were under tremendous pressure back then. The hospital was struggling financially, and there was immense pressure to increase revenue. Some procedures were optimized to generate more profit." The doctor paused, glancing at the monitors displaying Richard's vitals. For a moment, he seemed to notice a slight change in heart rate, but continued, "Your mother didn't need that additional procedure I performed. A simpler one would have fixed her issue, but the hospital pressured me into doing something more complex, more expensive." Richard felt a rising fury but maintained his composure. Finally, he was hearing the confession he had suspected for years. "Her complication was my fault. I chose the wrong procedure due to financial pressure, not medical necessity. And now seeing you here like this, I can no longer live with this guilt." Dr. Michael left room 302, leaving Richard alone with the devastating truth. His mother had been harmed by greed, not by an unavoidable medical complication as he had been told at the time. In the following days, Jennifer began to notice small changes in her father's vital signs whenever she mentioned her grandmother Elizabeth. She decided to investigate on her own and went to her father's house to look for documents related to her mother's case. In Richard's office, Jennifer found a folder labeled Mercy General Hospital Investigation. Inside were copies of medical records, notes about other patients who had undergone unnecessary surgeries, and the contact information for a private investigator. She realized her father had been planning something for a long time. "What are you up to, Dad?" Jennifer murmured as she flipped through the documents. Among the papers, she found letters from other families reporting similar experiences at the hospital. patients who went in for simple procedures and left with severe complications. All had premium insurance plans, and all had been treated by Dr. Michael or his team. Jennifer decided to confront the hospital administration the next day. She sought out the medical director, Dr. William Peterson, a man in his 60s who had led the institution for over a decade. "Dr. William, I need to talk about my grandmother, Mrs. Elizabeth Morgan. She was operated on here 5 years ago by Dr. Michael." "Of course, Jennifer. I remember the case. A complex surgery, but we did everything within our power," Dr. William replied. But Richard, who knew body language well from his years as a businessman, would have noticed the discomfort in his voice. "I found documents suggesting her surgery was unnecessarily complicated. I'd like an explanation." Dr. William visibly tensed. "Jennifer, your father is in a delicate situation. Perhaps now isn't the best time to dig up the past. Our focus should be on his recovery." The evasive answer only confirmed Richard's growing suspicions. There was a conspiracy at the hospital to perform unnecessary procedures, and his mother had been one of the victims. That same afternoon, a woman around 50 sought Jennifer out at the hospital. It was Susan Miller, a former employee of Mercy General Hospital's surgery department. "I heard you're looking into your grandmother's case. I worked here for 15 years before being fired for questioning certain procedures." Susan revealed she had documented multiple cases of patients receiving more expensive and complex treatments than necessary, especially those with premium insurance or who paid out of pocket. "Your grandmother was operated on when the hospital was in severe financial trouble. There was enormous pressure from administration to increase revenue. Doctor Michael was one of the most pressured doctors because he had so many high-income patients." "Do you have proof?" Jennifer asked. "Some, but nothing I could prove alone. That's why I was fired. They said I was stirring up unnecessary trouble." Richard listened from the doorway of his room, where Susan had taken Jennifer to speak away from prying eyes. Every word confirmed his worst suspicions about what had happened to his mother. In the days that followed, Dr. Michael began visiting Richard outside official hours more frequently. His confessions grew more detailed and disturbing. "Richard, I visit your mother every week. I go to her house and oversee her physical therapy exercises, without charging a dime. I know this doesn't undo what I did, but it's the only way I've found to deal with the guilt." The doctor revealed there were other patients in similar situations and that he had been paying out of his own pocket for treatments and therapies to try to lessen the harm he caused. "Your family never knew, but I fund Mrs. Elizabeth's specialized physical therapy plan. It's the least I can do after what happened." Richard felt torn between anger at what the doctor had done and an odd sense of compassion upon seeing the genuine remorse Michael carried. Dr. Michael's wife, Linda Stevens, appeared at the hospital on a rainy Thursday afternoon. She was visibly distressed and searched for her husband in Richard's room. "Michael, you need to stop this. You need to step away from this case." "I can't, Linda. I can't abandon this man like I abandoned his mother." "You're destroying yourself with this guilt. You have nightmares every night. You can't operate with peace anymore. This will ruin your career and our marriage." Richard listened to the argument and began to understand the extent of the suffering the mistake had caused, not just to his family, but to the doctor himself. "I need to find a way to fix what I did, Linda. I can't just pretend nothing happened." "Then do it officially. Sue the hospital, expose the system that pressured you, but stop torturing yourself by visiting these patients." The conversation revealed to Richard that Dr. Michael wasn't just a greedy doctor, but also a victim of the hospital's corrupt system. This complicated his thirst for revenge. Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, take a moment to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing. On a quiet Saturday night when the hospital was nearly empty, Nancy approached Richard's bed again. "I know you're awake, Mr. Richard, and I know you're suffering hearing all this." Richard didn't respond, but Nancy continued. "I've worked here for 30 years. I've seen so much injustice, so many mistakes, so much pain. But I've also seen doctors like Dr. Michael destroy themselves, trying to make up for their errors." The nurse moved closer. "Sometimes forgiveness is more powerful than justice. I'm not saying what he did was right, But ruining his life won't bring your mother's health back. Richard thought about Nancy's words all through the night. His quest for justice was turning into a far more complex journey about guilt, redemption, and forgiveness. The following Monday, Dr. Michael brought 2 specialists from New York City to examine Richard's case. During the consultation, Richard overheard, "Dr. Michael, this patient had a very specific nervous breakdown. The neurological tests show no significant structural damage. With the right treatment, he could fully recover." "Money isn't an issue," Dr. Michael said. "I'll cover any necessary treatment." Richard was surprised. The doctor was willing to use his own resources to ensure his recovery, even without knowing if Richard would ever be aware of it. During one of Jennifer's visits, something unexpected happened. She was telling him about a visit to her grandmother when she mentioned, "Grandma Elizabeth had a strange improvement yesterday, Dad. She recognized me for the first time in months and asked about you." Richard couldn't fully control his reaction. His eyes moved slightly and Jennifer noticed, "Dad, can you hear me?" Richard kept his eyes closed, but Jennifer had seen the movement. She began to suspect her father wasn't as unconscious as he seemed. "Dad, if you can hear me, move the pinky finger on your right hand." Richard hesitated. Keeping up the act was becoming harder by the day, especially knowing his mother had improved. "I know you're pretending, Dad. I found your investigation documents about the hospital." Finally, Richard opened his eyes and looked at his daughter. Jennifer began to cry, a mix of relief and anger in her voice. "Why did you do this to me? Why let me suffer, thinking I was going to lose you too?" "I needed to know the truth about what happened to your grandmother," Richard said, his voice hoarse after weeks of silence. "And did you find it?" "I found more than I ever imagined." Richard told Jennifer everything he had heard during the weeks he pretended to be unconscious. Dr. Michael's confession, the hospital's pressure, the doctor's genuine remorse, and the secret care he had been giving Mrs. Elizabeth. "What are you going to do now?" Jennifer asked. "I don't know. I wanted revenge, but now it's more complicated." That same afternoon, Dr. Michael entered the room for his routine visit and found Richard sitting up in bed, fully conscious. "Richard, you're awake?" "I am. And I heard everything you said to me these past weeks." Dr. Michael paled and leaned against the wall. I can explain. You don't need to. You already did. Many times." The doctor began to cry. "Richard, I know I can't undo what I did to your mother. I know I ruined her life and your family's. But I swear since then, I've completely changed how I practice medicine." "I know you have. I saw you saving that child's life yesterday without worrying if the parents could pay." Dr. Michael looked surprised. "You saw that?" "I saw a lot, including your visits to my mother, the specialists you brought to examine me, paying out of your own pocket, and your wife's despair watching you destroy yourself with guilt." The 2 men sat in silence for a few minutes. "What do you want from me, Richard?" "I want you to help me create something good from this tragedy." Richard explained his idea. Instead of destroying Michael's career, they would work together to create safety protocols to prevent other patients from suffering the same fate. "You have the medical knowledge. I have the financial resources. We can create an institute that monitors medical procedures and ensures patients only receive necessary treatments." Dr. Michael was stunned. "You'd forgive me after everything I did?" "It's not forgiveness yet. It's a chance for both of us to make something useful out of this pain." In the following months, Richard and Dr. Michael worked together to develop the Elizabeth Morgan Institute for Medical Ethics, named in honor of Richard's mother. The institute offered free second opinions for complex procedures and maintained a database of best medical practices. The initiative began gaining attention in medical circles, and other hospitals started implementing similar protocols. Dr. Michael became a vocal advocate for medical transparency, using his own experience as an example of the dangers of financial pressure in medicine. During this time, Jennifer and Linda, Dr. Michael's wife, started a support group for families affected by medical errors. The focus wasn't just on compensation, but on prevention and reconciliation. "It's amazing how people can come together through pain," Linda remarked during one of their meetings. My father always said, "The greatest transformations can come from the greatest tragedies," Jennifer replied. The experimental treatment Dr. Michael had discovered for Mrs. Elizabeth continued to show promising results. After 8 months, she regained much of her mobility and began consistently recognizing her family again. "Richard, my son, you've changed," Mrs. Elizabeth said during one of their weekly visits. "I've gotten older, Mom." "No, it's not that. You're at peace." Richard smiled. His mother had always had an uncanny intuition, even during the hardest moments of her condition. Dr. Michael developed a new surgical technique based on his experience with past mistakes. The technique was presented at international medical conferences and began to be adopted by hospitals across the country. "Sometimes our greatest failures lead to our greatest achievements," he said to Richard during one of the Institute's meetings. "My mother always said that when I was a child." Dear listener, if you're enjoying the story, don't forget to like and especially subscribe to the channel. It helps us a lot as we're just starting out. Now, continuing, Mercy General Hospital underwent a complete restructuring. Dr. William Peterson was replaced as director, and new protocols were implemented to ensure financial pressure would never again influence medical decisions. Richard used his influence as a successful businessman to promote changes in state medical legislation. The Elizabeth Morgan Bill established strict standards for approving medical procedures and created an independent auditing system for private hospitals. "Your father turned a personal tragedy into a revolution in the state's medical field," commented Susan Miller, who had been reinstated at the hospital as a medical ethics supervisor. During the inauguration ceremony of the Elizabeth Morgan Institute for Medical Ethics, Richard gave an emotional speech. "My mother always taught me that life gives us choices. We can choose bitterness or transformation. We chose to turn our pain into hope for other families." Dr. Michael also spoke at the event. "I made a grave mistake that changed a family's life forever. But I've learned that redemption doesn't come from running away from our mistakes, but from turning them into something greater than ourselves." In the audience, Nancy, the nurse who always knew Richard was pretending, smiled proudly. She had seen many sad stories at the hospital, but few had ended with such positive transformation. 2 years after Richard's ruse began, the Institute had helped over 1,000 families obtain second medical opinions, preventing hundreds of unnecessary procedures. The model was replicated in other states, creating a national patient protection network. Richard and Dr. Michael developed an unlikely friendship, built on mutual respect and shared purpose. They had lunch together every Friday, discussing cases from the Institute and sharing stories about their families. "You know, Richard, sometimes I wonder if it wasn't fate that brought us together in such a strange way," Michael said during one of these lunches. "I don't believe in fate, Michael. I believe in choices. And we both made good choices after a terrible situation." Mrs. Elizabeth became something of a symbol for the Institute. At 88, she actively participated in support group meetings, offering her wisdom and experience to other families. "You know," she said during one meeting, "I lost so much because of that surgery. But I gained something unexpected. I saw my son become an even better man than I ever thought he could be." Jennifer followed in her father and grandmother's footsteps, studying medical law to specialize in patient advocacy. She and Linda expanded the support group, creating a national organization that provided legal and emotional support to families affected by medical errors. Mercy General Hospital became a model of medical transparency, implementing cameras in operating rooms with patient consent, rigorous second opinion protocols, and a continuous feedback system for patients and their families. During a routine visit to the Institute, Richard encountered a family in a situation similar to what his own had faced 5 years earlier. The parents of a 25-year-old woman were desperate after she developed complications following what had seemed like a simple surgery. "Dr. Richard, we don't know what else to do. The doctors say they did everything right, but our daughter is worse off than before the surgery." Richard sat down with them and shared his own story. The family was stunned to learn that the respected director of the Institute had gone through a similar experience. "You really pretended to be in a coma to uncover the truth? I've done worse things in my business career," Richard smiled. But this was the first time my dishonesty served a greater purpose. The institute arranged a second opinion for the young girl, and it was discovered she had undergone an unnecessary procedure. With the right treatment, she made a full recovery in 6 months. "You saved our daughter," the father said, tears in his eyes. "We didn't save her. We just kept you from spending years without knowing the truth, like I did." Dr. Michael developed a mentorship program for young doctors, focusing on medical ethics and resisting institutional pressure. The program became mandatory in all medical schools across the state. "Medicine is about healing people, not enriching hospitals," he told each new class of students. One student raised their hand. "Professor Michael, is it true you made a serious mistake in the past?" "It's true, and that's why I'm here, to make sure you don't make the same mistakes I did." He shared his full story, including Richard's deception and how it had transformed both their lives. During the Institute's 3rd anniversary, Richard organized a special ceremony in the very same room 302 at Mercy General Hospital, where he had pretended to be in a coma. The room was now used as a meeting space for medical ethics discussions. "It's symbolic to be here," Richard told the attendees. "In this room I learned that sometimes we must pretend to be dead to discover how to truly live." Dr. Michael also spoke at the ceremony. "This room taught me that confessions can be freeing, but only when they lead to real action to correct past mistakes." Nancy, now a nursing supervisor, was honored for her intuition in detecting Richard's deception and for offering the right words at the right time. "I always knew that man was up to something," she said, laughing, "but I never imagined his scheme would change so many lives." The Institute also created a support program for healthcare professionals who make medical errors, focusing on emotional and professional rehabilitation rather than just punishment. "Doctors are human too," Linda explained during group therapy sessions, "and humans make mistakes. What matters is how we respond to them." The program helped dozens of doctors cope with guilt and find constructive ways to address their mistakes, preventing personal tragedies like the one Dr. Michael nearly faced. Richard established an endowment fund to ensure the Institute's financial stability for at least 50 years. He wanted to make sure the work continued even after he was gone. "My greatest achievement wasn't the millions I made in business," he said in an interview with a medical journal. "It was realizing we can turn our worst experience into the best thing we do for others." Richard's story became a case study in medical and hospital administration schools worldwide. His unorthodox strategy of feigning unconsciousness to uncover the truth sparked ethical debates about medical transparency and patient rights. During an international conference on medical ethics in Washington, D.C., Richard was invited as the keynote speaker. "I don't recommend other patients do what I did," he told the audience of doctors and hospital administrators. "But I do recommend we all create systems where patients don't need to resort to such extreme measures to discover the truth about their medical care." Dr. Michael also participated in the conference, presenting the protocols they had developed together. "Mr. Richard's case taught me that transparency isn't just ethical, it's also good medicine. When we're honest with patients, everyone benefits." The American model began to be replicated in other countries. A delegation of Japanese doctors visited the institute to study the protocols, followed by delegations from Argentina, Chile, and Colombia. "You've created something truly revolutionary," said the head of the Japanese delegation. "The combination of systematic second opinions, emotional support, and a focus on prevention is unique in the world." During a routine visit to Mrs. Elizabeth, now 90 years old and still actively involved in the Institute's work, Richard reflected on the extraordinary journey that began with his desperate ruse. "Mom, sometimes I wonder if you'd be proud or horrified to know I faked a coma to investigate your doctor." Mrs. Elizabeth, her clarity fully restored, smiled. "My son, I always knew you'd do anything for your family, but I never imagined you'd do something so crazy that it would end up helping so many others." "What do you mean you always knew?" "Richard, I've been your mother for 65 years. Do you think I don't recognize that look in your eyes when you're planning something?" Richard laughed, realizing his deception might not have been as convincing as he thought to those who truly knew him. Dr. Michael continued visiting Mrs. Elizabeth weekly, no longer out of guilt but genuine affection. They developed a special friendship built on conversations about medicine, family, and life. "Dear Doctor," as Mrs. Elizabeth affectionately called him, "you know I forgave you long ago, right?" "I know, Mrs. Elizabeth, but I'm still learning to forgive myself." That's a young person's mistake, thinking self-forgiveness is harder than forgiving others. With age, you learn they're the same thing. The Institute also developed an educational program for patients and families, teaching them about their rights, how to ask doctors the right questions, and when to seek a second opinion. Jennifer led the program, combining her legal expertise with the emotional experience her family had endured. "You have the right to fully understand what's happening to you or your loved one," she told each new group of participants. "Ask everything, question everything, seek clarity until you're satisfied." The program included simulations where actors played doctors and patients, allowing families to practice asking critical questions and identifying red flags in medical procedures. One participant was Mrs. Cynthia, 78, whose family had avoided unnecessary surgery thanks to a second opinion from the Institute. "I used to be afraid of questioning doctors. I thought it was disrespectful. Now I know asking questions is how I take care of my own health." Susan Miller, the former employee fired for questioning procedures, became one of the Institute's lead researchers. She studied patterns of unnecessary treatments and developed alerts to flag potential issues. "It's ironic," she remarked during a team meeting. "I was fired for doing exactly what I'm now respected for and paid to do as my main job." Richard established an annual tradition. Every March 15th, the anniversary of his mother's surgery, he would spend 24 hours in room 302 at Mercy General Hospital, not pretending to be unconscious, but reflecting on the journey and planning new projects for the Institute. "It's my day of reconnection," he would explain, "remembering where it all began and thinking about how far we can go." Dr. Michael always joined him for these annual vigils. They would talk about the toughest cases of the year, the families they had helped, and the challenges ahead. During the 5th annual vigil, Richard made an unexpected proposal. "Michael, I think it's time we expanded internationally." "How so?" "We've received invitations from 12 countries to implement our model. What if we created an international foundation?" The Elizabeth Morgan International Foundation was established the following year, headquartered in New York City, but with offices in Chicago, Los Angeles, New York City, and Miami. The American model of preventive medical ethics began to be implemented in hospitals across Latin America. Richard, now 70, scaled back his business activities to dedicate himself fully to the foundation. Dr. Michael, at 55, became the international medical director of the organization. "I never imagined my greatest legacy would be built on my biggest mistake," Michael said during the foundation's launch ceremony. "And I never imagined my greatest achievement would come from my most desperate lie," Richard replied. The ceremony took place in the same auditorium at Mercy General Hospital, where Richard had faked his nervous breakdown 5 years earlier. The symbolism wasn't lost on those present. Nancy, now the hospital's director of nursing, served as the MC. "As a nurse, I've seen many stories in this hospital, but I've never seen one that began with such an elaborate lie and ended with so much truth and transformation." During her speech, Mrs. Elizabeth, now 92 but still sharp and active, received a standing ovation. "My dears, when I woke up from that surgery 7 years ago and realized something had gone wrong, I never imagined my suffering would help spare thousands of other families from the same pain. Sometimes God writes straight with crooked lines, as the saying goes." The audience was visibly moved. Many of those present were families who had been helped by the Institute over the years. A young resident raised his hand during the Q&A. "Mr. Richard, don't you think your way of uncovering the truth was unethical?" Richard thought carefully before answering. "It was. And it was also desperate, risky, and potentially dangerous. But sometimes corrupt systems force honest people into dishonest methods. My role now is to ensure other patients don't have to resort to such extremes to protect their families." Dr. Michael added, "What Richard did was ethically wrong, but it was humanly necessary. Our job is to create systems where transparency is natural, not achieved through subterfuge. The Institute also launched an international exchange program for doctors, allowing professionals from different countries to learn about medical ethics and error prevention. The program included rotations at Mercy General Hospital, which had become a global center of excellence in medical transparency. Dr. Chen, a Japanese surgeon who participated, remarked, "In Japan, we have a culture of not questioning medical authorities, but I've learned here that respectful questioning is an act of care, not disrespect." The program also included visits to Mrs. Elizabeth's home, where participating doctors could speak directly with a patient affected by a medical error and see how she and her family had transformed the experience. Talking with Mrs. Elizabeth, "I realized that our patients aren't just clinical cases," said Dr. Mary Williams, a surgeon from Los Angeles. "They're people with families who suffer alongside them. This completely changed my approach as a doctor." Richard was growing increasingly interested in philosophy and medical ethics. At 72, he decided to return to university for a master's degree in bioethics, specifically studying medical transparency and patient rights. "It's never too late to learn," he told Jennifer, who supported his decision. "And I need to understand, theoretically, what I'm doing practically." His master's thesis was titled "Unconventional Methods of Discovering Medical Truth, a Personal Case Study." The work sparked international academic interest and was published in several specialized journals. Dr. Michael also pursued further academic specialization, earning a doctorate in medical ethics focused on rehabilitating professionals who make mistakes. His dissertation was titled "Turning Guilt into Competence: Reintegration Models for Physicians After Major Errors." "We're becoming scholars in our golden years," Richard joked during one of their shared academic sessions. "Better late than never. And our practical experience gives weight to our theoretical studies." The Elizabeth Morgan International Foundation partnered with the World Health Organization to develop global guidelines on medical transparency and error prevention. Richard and Dr. Michael were appointed as special consultants to the WHO for the project. Who would have thought a charade in a New York City hospital room would reach the halls of the WHO in Geneva, Richard remarked during his first meeting at the organization's headquarters. The WHO project led to the creation of international protocols adopted by over 60 countries. The Elizabeth Protocol, as it came to be known, established minimum standards for informed consent, second opinions in complex cases, and support for families affected by medical errors. During the protocol's launch ceremony in Geneva, the WHO Director General commented, "Rarely do we see a global transformation in medical practice born from such a specific personal experience. The US case taught us that truly ethical medicine begins with absolute honesty between doctors and patients." Richard was invited to lecture worldwide on business ethics, organizational transparency, and personal transformation. His story became a case study in management and medical courses. At Harvard Business School, a student asked, "Mr. Morgan, would you use the same method again if needed?" "I hope I never have to, but if I did, probably yes. The truth is worth almost any sacrifice, especially when it concerns the health of those we love." Dr. Michael also became an international speaker, focusing on professional redemption and medical ethics. His brutal honesty about his own mistakes moved audiences worldwide. Dr. Michael's courage in publicly admitting his errors and working to correct them is an example to us all, remarked a medical dean during a conference in Boston. Richard and Michael's story was adapted into an award-winning documentary. The film, The Pretended Truth, followed their lives for 2 years, showcasing the Institute's daily work and its global impact on families. The documentary included heartfelt interviews with Mrs. Elizabeth, who at 94 still actively participated in the Foundation's work. "My children, when you reach my age, you'll understand that life has a funny way of turning our greatest pains into our greatest purposes." During the premiere of the documentary in New York City, Richard gave a speech that moved the audience. "This film tells our story, but in truth it tells the story of everyone who refused to accept injustice as inevitable. It shows that an ordinary person, in despair, can start movements that transform entire systems. The documentary's box office earnings were entirely donated to the expansion of the Elizabeth Morgan International Foundation to African and Asian countries. The first office in Africa opened in San Francisco, followed by Boston and Philadelphia. Dr. Sarah Johnson, medical director of the San Francisco office, remarked during the inauguration, "The American model teaches us that medical transparency isn't a luxury for wealthy nations, but a fundamental human right that must be guaranteed to all patients, no matter where they live." Richard and Dr. Michael made sure to attend all the inaugurations of the new offices, despite their advanced ages. For them, seeing the global impact of their personal journey was the greatest possible reward. At the office in Seattle, in the Philippines, they met the Brown family, who had avoided unnecessary surgery thanks to the protocol implemented at the local hospital. "You saved not just my wife, but our entire family," said Mr. Brown tearfully. "How can we thank people we've never even met but who changed our lives?" "You thank us by continuing to question, continuing to seek second opinions, continuing to demand transparency," Richard replied, "and by teaching others to do the same." The foundation also developed a mobile app that allowed patients worldwide to seek medical second opinions, access information about their rights, and connect with local support groups. The app was downloaded over 10 million times in its first year. "Technology allows us to democratize access to medical transparency," explained Jennifer, who had become the foundation's technology director. "Now anyone with a phone can access resources that were once available only to a few." The app also included an alert feature that notified users about potential signs of unnecessary procedures, based on patterns identified by Susan Miller's research over the years. During a medical technology conference in San Francisco, the app was awarded Digital Health Innovation of the Year. "Rarely do we see technology used so directly to empower patients," said the lead judge. This app turns phones into tools of medical protection. Richard, now 75, decided to write his memoirs. The book, "The Truth I Discovered While Pretending to Be Dead," became an international bestseller, translated into 35 languages. "I wrote this book not to tell my story, but to inspire others not to accept injustice as inevitable," he said during the launch. The book included chapters written by Dr. Michael, Jennifer, Mrs. Elizabeth, and Nancy, each sharing their perspective on the journey. Mrs. Elizabeth's chapter, dictated to Jennifer as her hands could no longer write, was considered by many critics to be the most touching. "When you live to 95, as I have, you learn that life's hardest moments also teach us the most about who we truly are and what we're capable of." The book's proceeds were entirely donated to create an emergency fund, providing financial support to families undergoing complex medical treatment, ensuring that money would never be an obstacle to seeking second opinions or proper care. The fund helped over 5,000 families in its first year of operation. One of them was the Smith family from rural Kansas, whose 12-year-old daughter needed complex surgery. "Without this fund, we never would have been able to bring our daughter to New York City for a second opinion," said the mother. "We discovered there was a less invasive treatment that worked perfectly." Dr. Michael, now 62, was elected president of the World Association of Medical Ethics, becoming the first American to hold the position. In his inauguration speech, he said, "I hold this position not despite the mistakes I've made, but because of them. My errors have taught me the importance of humility, transparency, and redemption in medicine." Richard was named an honorary member of numerous medical academies around the world, a rare recognition for someone without formal medical training. He always made sure to mention in his acceptance speeches, "I receive this honor not for my medical knowledge, which is limited, but from my experience as a patient and a patient's family member." That perspective is as valuable as any medical degree. The Elizabeth Morgan International Foundation became the world's largest medical transparency organization, with offices in 45 countries and over 10,000 volunteers worldwide. The annual budget exceeded $100 million, funded by donations, book and lecture revenues, and partnerships with governments and international organizations. During the Foundation's 10th anniversary celebration, held in the same auditorium at Mercy General Hospital where it all began, Richard gave an emotional speech. 10 years ago, I was just a desperate businessman willing to pretend to be dead to uncover the truth about what happened to my mother. Today, we are a global family united by the belief that every patient deserves complete honesty from their doctors. Mrs. Elizabeth, now 97 and in a wheelchair but still sharp, was the last to speak at the ceremony. "My dear children and grandchildren from all over the world," she said, referring to the audience, "I never imagined my suffering would plant the seeds of so much hope. Thank you for turning my pain into healing for so many other families." The crowd rose in a standing ovation that lasted over 5 minutes. Many wept, including Richard and Dr. Michael, who embraced on stage under the emotional applause of those present. Nancy, now retired, but still an active volunteer for the foundation, later remarked, "In 35 years of nursing, I've seen many things, but I've never seen a lie generate so much truth, or a tragedy create so much hope." Richard and Dr. Michael, now the closest of friends, continued working together daily, even in their later years. They had lunch together every Friday, a tradition they kept for over a decade. "You know, Michael," Richard said during one of these lunches, "sometimes I think my life truly began at 65, when I pretended to be dead in that hospital room. And mine restarted the day you woke up and chose to forgive me instead of destroy me." The two men, now bound by a friendship forged in pain and tempered by redemption, kept working to ensure their personal stories became protection for millions of families worldwide. On the last day of her life, Mrs. Elizabeth, at 98, was surrounded by Richard, Jennifer, Dr. Michael, Linda, and Nancy. Her final words were, "Thank you for turning my story into hope for the world." Richard held his mother's hand and whispered, "Thank you for teaching me that even the most desperate lies can give birth to the most transformative truths." Mrs. Elizabeth's funeral drew thousands of people from dozens of countries. Doctors, patients, family members, and foundation volunteers traveled to New York City to pay tribute to the woman who had become a global symbol for the fight for medical transparency. Arlington National Cemetery had never witnessed such an international ceremony. Speeches were given in Portuguese, Spanish, English, French, and Japanese, all sharing stories of how Mrs. Elizabeth's journey had touched their lives. Richard, now 78, decided it was time to pass the foundation's leadership to Jennifer. During the transition ceremony, he reflected on the extraordinary journey that began with his desperate charade. "I'm handing this organization's leadership to my daughter, knowing she'll take it further than I ever imagined possible. Mrs. Elizabeth's work will continue for generations." Dr. Michael, now 65, announced his retirement from clinical medicine to dedicate himself fully to medical ethics research and training new doctors. "I spent the first half of my career making mistakes. I want to spend the second half teaching others how to avoid them." The Elizabeth Morgan International Foundation announced the creation of the Global University of Medical Ethics, with its main campus in New York City and research centers in 10 countries. The university would offer undergraduate and graduate programs focused exclusively on medical transparency, patient rights, and error prevention. Richard and Dr. Michael were named founding chancellors. Room 302 at Mercy General Hospital was transformed into a permanent classroom, where students from around the world would come to learn about the importance of honesty in medicine. "This room taught me the most important lessons of my life," Richard said during the inaugural class. "I hope it teaches you too." The university's first class included students from 25 countries. At the graduation ceremony, a Nigerian student remarked, "I learned here that medicine isn't just about healing bodies. It's about honoring the trust patients place in us." Richard, now 80 and still active despite his age, decided to take one last grand trip. He visited all 45 of the Foundation's offices worldwide, meeting local teams and families who had been helped over the years. "This is my farewell journey," he told Dr. Michael. "I want to see firsthand the fruits of what we planted together." In every country, Richard was welcomed as a hero. In Houston, a crowd of over 1,000 gathered to hear him speak. In London, the president awarded him the Presidential Medal of Freedom for his service to humanity. But the visit that moved him most was to the Foundation's first patient outside the United States. Mr. Johnson in Chicago whose wife had avoided unnecessary surgery thanks to a second opinion obtained through the Foundation's protocol. "Mr. Richard," said Johnson, now 85, "my wife lived 8 more years because of your work. 8 years we wouldn't have had if not for your courage to pretend to be dead to uncover the truth." Richard embraced the elderly man, remembering why he had started it all: to protect the people we love from a system that sometimes fails. Back in the United States, Richard organized one last ceremony in room 302 at Mercy General Hospital. 15 years after his original charade, he lay on the same bed, now surrounded by hundreds whose lives had been changed by his journey. "This time I'm not pretending," he said with a smile. "I'm truly at peace." Dr. Michael held his hand. "Richard, thank you for giving me the chance to turn my greatest mistake into my greatest contribution to the world." "Michael, thank you for showing me that forgiveness and justice can be the same thing." Jennifer kissed her father's forehead. "Dad, thank you for teaching me that from our biggest lies can come our greatest truths." Richard closed his eyes for a moment, not pretending to be unconscious this time, but simply reflecting on the extraordinary journey that had begun in that very room 15 years earlier. When he opened his eyes, he saw smiling faces all around him: Dr. Michael, Jennifer, Nancy, Susan, Linda, and dozens of others who had become family over the years. "You know," he said, "when I pretended to be dead in this bed, I was searching for justice, but I found something far better. I found purpose." The ceremony ended with Richard rising from the bed and walking to the window of the room, the same window through which he had watched the hospital's activity during his weeks of deception. "From this window 15 years ago, I saw only a hospital functioning as usual. Today I see a symbol of hope for patients around the world. The sun set over New York City, painting the sky in golden hues that reflected in the windows of Mercy General Hospital." Richard gazed at the horizon and smiled, knowing his extraordinary journey had transformed not only his own life, but the lives of millions worldwide. The story of the businessman who faked his own death to uncover the truth about his mother's doctor had become a global legend of redemption, forgiveness, and transformation. And it all began with a desperate lie in a hospital room in New York City. End of story. Now tell us what you thought of this story and where you're watching from. If you have something to share with us, leave a heartfelt comment below. Do you believe Richard made the right choice by pretending to be in a coma? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Thank you so much for joining us. Don't forget to like this video and, most importantly, subscribe to the channel so you won't miss other moving stories.